views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
On this particular show, we're going to talk about how the Bronx was actually a part of Black history as we elected the first woman and African American to the office of borough president. We'll also talk about the second African American mayor to be elected in New York City. That is Eric Adams. We've got an interesting show coming up, some great perspectives. Stay with us. Perspectives with yours truly starts now.
What's on your mind? Express what's on your mind. What's on your mind?
Anything relevant to life, you bring it to the table. Whether you make a move solo or a movement with a stable. No fables, you speak on your decisions. Cause in the long run, it's your voice, your views, your vision. Keeping it real with many messages for you to know. This ain't radio, but DJ runs the show. Entertainment, he rocks it. Politics, he locks it. The host with the most would handle any topic. Don't forget to share your perspective with shines of light. Cause it might make a difference in someone else's life.
Make a difference in someone's life. Express what's in your heart and your mind. Share your perspective.
And hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Perspectives. I am Daren Jaime. Of course, we thank you for joining us. As always, you can watch Perspectives here on BronxNet's Channel 67. We invite you to stay connected to us also on our social media platforms at BronxNet TV. And then also, if you want to follow me on social media, well, you get my professional page on Facebook. That's Daren C. Jaime. And then also on Twitter and Instagram at DC Jaime 23. There you can find out some information and possibly some inspiration as well. Well, we go front and center today on the show talking about Black History Month. As I said at the top of the show, Black history was made in the world of politics with two elections. Number one, the Bronx electing the first woman and first African-American woman to be elected as borough president in Vanessa Gibson. The second, New York City Mayor Eric Adams becoming the second African-American male to be elected in New York City. Times are definitely changing as both are taking the helm. Here to share a little bit more about that and more, we're pleased to be joined by our very special guest joining us today on the show. No stranger here to Perspectives. We've got Joyce Johnson, who is a political contributor. And then also we've got J.C. Polanco, who is an attorney and also professor at CUNY BMCC. And welcome both to the show. Glad to have you back in the new year.
So happy to be here.
Likewise. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. And we'll start off first, as we said, with the lead, talking about the historic election of Vanessa Gibson here in the borough of the Bronx. Both of you very familiar with her political work, and also the things that are going on across New York City. Joyce, I'll start off with you and say your thoughts on the election of Vanessa Gibson, the first African-American woman borough president.
Well, I'm always glad for first, but most notably hope it won't be the last. But the real deal, why she was elected, because of her performance in prior, offices she's held. She obviously has constituents of all colors, shapes, forms, economic, social status, who believed in her candidacy and thought that she was the best person for the job. And I agree. And 40 years ago, the first was, sometimes was remarkable, but there are so many in the pipeline. As you know, in addition to being a political contributor, I sit on the board, the PAC Committee for Higher Heights for America, and we are committed to seeing more women of color, African-American, Latina in public life. And there has been explosion in that all across the country. I'm glad to see it being done here, but let's be clear. It is really, she happens to be African-American. She happens to be a woman, but I would argue that she was the best person for the job, as was confirmed by the folks who elected her, or
JC,
rather hired her to do her job.
Yeah, and JC, I want to bring you in here too, as we say. I'll get your take on that. But then also, let's talk about right here in the borough of the Bronx. For this, a long time coming. I mean, to see a woman to be elected, it is, and she's elected, no doubt, on her credentials, but yet and still a long time coming. Give us a little bit of your perspective.
Well, I'm very hopeful of our borough president and what she's going to be able to do. She's a fellow University at Albany grad. We were there at the same time. And so I'm extra excited about having a Great Dane as borough president. I know that she worked tirelessly for this position, and I don't know if your viewers quite understand how monumental this is. The Bronx has historically been the place where you would get a Latino elected to borough president, and before that, it was either Italian or a Jew. Now, this time around, to have an African American knock down some of those barriers and get elected to the what many consider the most important position here in our county, it's a very exciting thing to see, and very exciting to see her break that glass ceiling. So I'm very excited for her. I think this is wonderful. We got to remember, this borough of the Bronx is producing some of the most incredible and powerful Black leaders in the state and the country. I mean, just think about this. We have a Black district attorney, female. We have the Speaker of the Assembly is Black. He is from the Bronx. We have not only that, but we have the chairman of the Rules Committee in the state Senate, who is the Democratic chairman, who is Black. And it doesn't stop there. Right near us, we have the Senate Majority Leader, who is literally in Yonkers, right over the Bronx River Road there, beginning her district. She's the Senate Majority Leader. And as far as the Black power and Black political power here in New York, not only do we have the mayor, we have the Attorney General, the Lieutenant Governor. So I think that what we're watching here is history, as so many Black and African American, I made that distinction. Black and African American leaders are just achieving some of the most incredible positions in our state and the country. And remember that in Brooklyn, you're looking at potentially the next Speaker of the House, who also happens to be Black, and Hakeem Jeffries. So, we're looking at some incredible times as far as where we are today and where we were before. And I think it's a wake-up call for a lot of us that we're watching history in the making here. These are new days. These are new times. This is in a place now where we're going to be concerned about who's Black and who's Latino and who's the other. We're electing people on their qualifications, and that's always exciting to see. And it's always exciting to see when it's of color, right? First. Yeah. And not to take too much of your time. I know we have an important program here, but it's important that we also make this observation. The Rainbow Coalition has been brought together, and it was brought together. We saw it in full fruition in 1984, as we saw many African American and Black mayors get elected, governors get elected around the country, Congress members get elected. But I think it's important as we take this energy and also recognize your Afro-Latino brothers and sisters who are also trying to make it, and also trying to get a seat at the table and be in the room where it happens. So let's not forget how important the African American and Afro-Latino coalitions have been throughout history. And let's pick each other up. I think it's going to be important moving down the road.
I think that's an outstanding observation. Outstanding.
Yeah, and Joyce, I'll bring it to this question, because J.C. stole a little bit of my thunder, because he named some names, but it's okay. The two names he did leave out was New York City Mayor Eric Adams, and we also have African American. Yeah,
that was your thunder. That's why I left it out.
Well, I'm reclaiming the thunder. You got Eric Adams. You have an African American police commissioner, and so the thought that goes around the city and the state, when we know that African Americans and communities of color have been long marginalized, is that we'll be able to possibly shorten that gap with these people elected in office. What does the election of all of these persons mean, particularly for African Americans and communities of color, but more in depth, the city and the state?
Well, what it has said, what we've long known, and it has been a journey in progress. There have always been, I mean, what JC is saying is absolutely true, but there have always been people of color, women of color, Latinos of color, but have been thought not to be prepared and ready. And it was systemic. Let's be real clear. We have broken barriers. So the system has been broken to where now we are accustomed to looking at people who happen to be all of that, but behind all of that is eminently qualified for the job, prepared for the job, have done the journey work, the constituent work, and all of that, so that they are ready. And we have an electorate who is saying, let the best man or woman win. And if it happens, whatever it happens to be, it happens to be. That's progress. That is progress. And so what they have to do is to keep this ball rolling, is to make sure, color notwithstanding, at the end of the day, we've hired every last one of these folks to do a job, to advance the needle, to improve our lives, to run an efficient government. And that will be the bottom line standard, because we are paying hefty salaries, pensions, and all of that for people who are frankly working for us.
Let me take a quick break and come back. Let me come back and take a quick break. After the break, I want to talk about the work that is going on right now. Both New York City Mayor Eric Adams, police commissioner. We've got also our Bronx Borough president, Vanessa Gibson, who've been battle tested just in the first month. We'll talk about that and more here on Perspectives. Coming back here on Perspectives, Daren Jaime here with you. Our guest today, Joyce Johnson, political contributor. And then also we got J.C. Polanco, attorney and professor at CUNY's BMCC. J.C., I'll start and bring you in on this one here. When we talk about New York City Mayor Eric Adams, Vanessa Gibson, really battle tested in the first month, not long after taking office, having to deal with the fire in the Bronx that 17 people tragically lost their lives. Talk to us a little bit about what you've seen, what you've been able to glance, because nobody expects that this is going to be what you have to deal with first coming in office. However, it's a grim reality for both of them.
Well, I'm just happy that we have a borough president and a mayor who, as you said, are battle tested, have an extensive resume, experience to demonstrate to the Bronxites and New Yorkers that they have demonstrated repeatedly the ability to do this work. This is something that on Perspectives and on your other programs, I have continued to harp on, because what I have seen throughout the rest of the city are people who are unqualified, who may use gimmicks, who take advantage of low voter turnout to get elected, and have a very light resume, have never seen anything like this before. So we are fortunate in that regard. In Vanessa Gibson, we have someone, in Borough President Gibson, we have someone who has worked a very long time with community groups, with the NYPD, with firefighters across our borough. So when this fire hit, we knew that if there is anyone that has the connections to those communities and has the connection to first responders, she's at 161st Street. And we have seen that this past Saturday, when members of the Hospitality Foundation, Ramon Martinez and Alfredo Anguera, as well as Borough President Fat Joe, all these individuals have gotten together to raise enormous amounts of money, getting support out for these individuals who have lost their lives in this fire. And I think that like this, we're going to experience more and more and more problems. We're as big as many states in the union. You know, we're going to experience a lot of issues. Good to know we have people who are able to take care of these issues for us.
Yeah. Joyce, you've already talked about credentials, and I know that, she's Borough President Gibson, served on the Public Safety Commission, the chair of the Public Safety Commission. We talk about quality of life issues. We talk about crime, criminal justice. She's front and center, and she's been dealing with this head on.
She's front and center, but with credentials, not credentials aside, here's someone with leadership and management and organizational know-how. And that's what a borough president, that's what our electeds are. They are the chief cook, bottle washer, and all of that. And what she has shown in particular, I love her style. She is not flamboyant. She is steady. She is thoughtful. She is an organizer. And going back to what J.C. said, all of this comes as decades-long experience coming from up the ranks in community and elected office to where she is eminently prepared, and leadership skills beyond imaginable. And so We got not lucky. We hope to get lucky with people like Vanessa Gibson, and my hope is the same with Eric Adams. But and at the end of the day, not color aside, not taking anything away from it, we are electing people as we always should. Not on demographics, not on gender, but eminently qualified. And now gender, it once was a barrier. Color and nationality was once a barrier. It is no longer. So we, the people, me, Susie, Joe, consumer of our electoral process, are glad to see we're hiring people who are so terribly qualified, and they happen to be women of color, men of color, nationality, our demographics. So that should have never been an issue. And as we are progressing, it is no longer.
Yeah.
Daren, I'm sorry.
Let me take a break. Come back. I got you. You're coming right back after the break. You get the comment.
Thank you.
J.C. Polanco, Joyce, we'll be right back. Let me take a quick break in a second.
When taking public transportation, don't touch your phone. Carry hand sanitizer and use it immediately upon leaving the bus or train. Avoid touching your face. If someone is coughing or sneezing, move away. Wash your hands with soap and water as soon as possible. Limit contact with poles. If possible, avoid rush hour. Don't eat or drink on public transportation. Keep your bag off the floor or other surfaces. Avoid directly touching turnstiles. Stay up to date with the latest from your local health department and CDC.
And we're back here on Perspectives. Daren Jaime here with you, and we've been talking with J.C. and also Joyce Johnson. J.C., before the break, you were getting ready to make a point, and I'll let you finish.
For many years, my students would tell me, Polanco, I wish we had people that look like us in positions of power. I wish we got to see ourselves in positions of power. I heard that ad nauseum, and I still hear it. But looking at the city today and looking at the all-star cast that I mentioned a little earlier in our time together in this program, I think it's abundantly clear that we see ourselves in every aspect of government. So it's time for us to really have an honest conversation about what are we going to do to reduce crimes in our community? What are we going to do to reduce crime? What are we going to do to reduce gun violence? What are we going to do to reduce criminal violence? I don't think we can say that we don't see ourselves any longer as a reason. We have to have an honest discussion. Unfortunately, I think that many of the leaders that have been elected that look like us here in this program are going to be the type that are going to be able to say, hey, listen, let's have an honest discussion as to why over 95% of us make up those who commit violent crimes. Why over 95% of us are those that are the victims of violent crimes. We have to have those discussions. And then after that, try to figure out why is it that we're only making up 8% of the voter turnout in New York City. These things are not acceptable. And now that we're in office, and now that we see ourselves, and now that all these glass ceilings are being broken, it's time to grab the bull by the horn and stop making excuses. I mean, these elected officials that we have here are able to do it, and I hope they do it.
Yeah, let's turn up the heat a little bit here, Joyce. As we look, we've got New York City Mayor Eric Adams, former New York City police officer, ascended the ranks of the police department. Many people are vocally optimistic that somebody who understands crime, understands quality of life, understands police-community relations will be able to deliver. Are you optimistic that he'll be able to deliver? Because you know that police-community relations are at an all-time low.
I have to be optimistic. We have no we have no other alternative but be optimistic. But we must also hold his or anybody elected in who gets our salaries, we repay their salaries, hold their foot to the fire, because as a community and as a town and city and boroughs and all, we want results. Crime is unacceptable. It's not. It is no way for us to live under the fear of crime, the assaults in the subways, the proliferation of guns and all of this. You know what? We don't want to have a record, and I'm sure we will not, of back in the 90s when everyone talked about New York City was the wild, wild west. And so these elected officials, we will hold their feet to the fire. They must hire the best people to do their jobs: police, sanitation, housing, all of these things, critical things that will move us forward, or have us with a reputation of going back to 1990s when New York City, no one wanted to live here, and for people who lived here, it was a horrible place to live. And so that begins with the JC pointed out, in some communities, we are hiring people who have been elected with something like 10% of the population. What that says, and JC, I'm going to share a story with you. So many times I've been on the campaign trail, as you know, and I would come up to folks and say, my name is Joyce Johnson. I'm running for so-and-so, so-and-so. And folks would say very, upwardly, whatever. Oh, Miss Johnson, thank you very much. I said, no. Call me Miss Johnson. I'm asking you to hire me with your vote. Hire me. This is a job and you are my employer. And that always left me with a sour note, because folks had it twisted. We have people believing, and you look at nationally, that the elected officials, those who we are hired with our vote, paid with our money and our taxes, are telling us what they will and will not do, sometimes against us. Now, I don't want to go national because we're talking about New York City. So it's our responsibility for community leaders, but what I also want to see, and people who have a Senate seat, council seat, I want to know, as JC pointed out before this segment, how many people are coming out to vote. You can't get your best friends, your church members, your posse that you hang out with, your sorority sisters, your whatever organization you belong to, get them to the polls at the expense of ignoring the other constituents.
JC, let me bring you in on that one, because I think when we talk about electing people, we've talked about it. Sometimes you see in just a primary election, we don't even have enough people to fill up Yankee Stadium.
Exactly.
No, it's actually awful. And if you Google me and BronxNet and you Google Daren Jaime, you'll see how many times we've talked about some of this turnout. And this is important. This is where you got to get some tough love to the viewers and those that are watching. Look, we live in some of the neediest communities in the entire state. You're looking at high poverty, high crime, high needs. People that need the most resources live in our community. And it turns out that in our communities, we have the least voter turnout. Now, you got 10 days before election day to vote early. You could get absentee ballots. Polls are open from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. at night. There's so many ways that you can vote. But what we have seen is time and time again, a very small amount. Take, for instance, the East Harlem district that just had a special election. The member that's there is going to represent 152,000 people and make laws for 19 million folks. Would you believe that the individual got elected with about 800 votes? We're talking about one of the most neediest communities in our city. Now, if you look at the Bronx is no different. We see very low, dismal turnouts. Now, enough with the excuses. If you know that you need help in your community, if you're not happy with your schools, if you're not happy with the elected officials, come out and vote. Now, one of the things that I think your viewers should keep in mind is that you have about 1 million voters in New York City that aren't allowed to vote in primaries. Those are your independent voters. These are people who don't belong to any parties. Well, unfortunately, New York has a closed primary system. An overwhelming majority of states around the country have open primaries where independents could come in and participate. The reason why this is important, and this is for your viewers, 99% of all the elections in New York City are decided in primaries. November, you put a glass of water. If it's a registered Democrat, they will win in 99% of the jurisdictions in New York City. And that's a fact because the numbers are so lopsided. So why not open up the primaries and allow for independents to vote? You get a couple of things, higher turnout, and you won't have these guys running for office and ladies running for office promising rainbows and pushing agendas to the far extremes of things. And you'll have more moderates and more centrists getting elected. I think we'll get more done. But what happened? The city council voted just a couple of weeks ago to allow for non-citizens to vote. That does a couple of things. It allows for about 1 million new voters to come in and vote, almost none African Americans, by the way. It dilutes the African American vote. It does. And this is something that is controversial to say. But Councilwoman Cumbo said this when she voted against it. She says, by allowing 1 million new non-citizens voting in our municipal elections, you have diluted the African American vote in New York City forever. And I think that's something that we should really talk about. And what can we do about allowing for so many African American and Latino independents to have a say in elections when you have 800 people voting, deciding the fate of 152,000 is not fair. And that's around the city.
Yeah. Got to take a quick break. We're going to talk about voting law changes right after this. Stay with us. You're watching Perspectives with Daren Jaime. Welcome back to Perspectives. Daren Jaime here with you. Our guests, J.C. Polanco and Joyce Johnson. And let me get to this topic real quick. Voting law changes right here in New York City. We know that you're talking about people coming out. Let's talk about the people who did come out. And 1,100 ballots being cast away simply because of affidavit issues. We got to make this voting law situation a whole lot better, JC, particularly here in New York State.
I agree.
We're talking smack about the rest of the country. And there's stuff going on here. Exactly.
Yeah, so right. Let me just see, JC, and then I'll let you join.
The truth of the matter is there's a lot of discussion about nationwide and what's happening in Georgia. But New York has some of the most insane laws regarding voting. And it's always been more restrictive than any of the states that we see a lot of press about. And I think it's important for us to have a discussion about how do we get more turnout? How do we secure the ballot? Those things are important. They're not mutually exclusive. We can discuss both of them together at the same time. But New York is behind the 8 ball when it comes to getting more people to the ballots. And I think a lot of it has to do with how many elected officials like it. They want to make sure that they control the process from redistricting to turnout. And that's becoming an issue as we see more and more young people involved. I see we're going to see bigger changes.
We always think of ourselves as progressive. No, we're not. We're opportunistic, and the system protects itself. What we have to do, JC and Joyce and Daren, is to expose it. This is part one. Maybe every time, we meet again, this starts to be part of the body politics, the psyche in folks' mind. We are educating. We are sharing. We are towards a more perfect union. And I think that should be the theme for this year. As we move into Black History Month, as we'll go into Hispanic History Month and every other month, let's do that.
Yeah,
I'm on.
We'll definitely be able to have part two, and we definitely are having part two. We've got Hispanic Heritage Month. Want to bring you guys both to come back and talk about that and be able to share. We're about out of time for this show. It's been a full show, but thank you both to Joyce and JC for being here with us on Perspectives, and thank you for the contributions that you're making in making voices heard. Yes. Well, want to let you know that we are out of time, but definitely want to thank you for joining us. As we say, a lot to tune into. We've been doing this show for more than 20 years. Glad to bring you good content, good things to think about, but also things where you can have civic engagement and take action. So be sure to share your perspective with somebody else you just don't know. It might make a difference in somebody else's life. I'm Daren Jaime. For all of us here on Perspective saying take care, God bless, and we'll see you soon.
Because it might make a difference in someone else's life.
Make a difference in someone's life. Express what's in your heart and your mind. Share your perspective.